Well, we continue to look closer at what was announced in the throne speech in our province this week. One of those items, as I alluded to, was a big change coming to the Trans-Canada Highway west of Winnipeg at the intersection of Highways 1 and 5. That was the site of Manitoba's deadliest bus collision 2 years ago now. Now, initially, transportation experts recommended an R-cut be constructed to improve safety. But after consultation with the public, the province is going to build the more expensive idea and create an overpass. Premier Wab Kinew was at the Carberry Community Hall yesterday.
After hearing from your perspective, hearing the voices of other folks in the surrounding region, it was really important for me to say, well, we got to get this right. This intersection is not like any other intersection. There's a history, there's a sensitivity, and we have to respect that. And so, just to maybe pull back the curtain there, you had the one approach that was being presented earlier on, the R-cut, and you had an overpass. I think the technical term is interchange. So if you look in the diamond, interchange is the term that gets used in the engineering documents. So going back to the initial announcement that we were going to do consultations about this, you may remember that we said there's a number of different options we looked at, everything from putting traffic lights at the intersection, to these different designs, to all sorts of things. Long and short of it is, all those approaches were maybe, in terms of the safety score that the engineers do, a little bit lower. There were two clear front runners. One was the R-cut and the other one was the overpass. And they're basically tied. The overpass may be slightly ahead by a few points, but basically the same level in terms of safety. And so when that R-cut was dismissed or maybe identified by the community as not being the right fit, that left one option in terms of safety. So from the last time that there was a town hall and consultations, it's taken us a bit of time because we had to go back and talk a bit about what the design's going to mean, had to put it through our budget process, and then of course a whole ton of other behind the scenes work gets done before we're able to come to a day like today where we're saying, yes, we got the plan to pay for it, we've got the work plan to move ahead with this, and we're very, very confident that we can do this in a way that's going to guarantee safety, guarantee usability for you, the folks who use it most frequently, and then most of all, just hit all those different priorities in the right way that shows respect for what everyone has been living through. A couple details I'll share with you. The costing, right now we're looking at about $100 million in terms of the overall budget for this project. Timeline being another consideration, because we had to take a step back and now we're going to be redoing the design and engineering around this project. We're looking at using the remainder of this fiscal year, so the 25-26 fiscal year is going to be about locking in those next steps in terms of design. Heading into the next year, that's the engineering, the land acquisition, because as you know, surrounding the Trans-Canada, we're going to have to put the pieces of land together to be able to build this new overpass. And then construction should start heading into that following year, 2027. At best guess, they're telling us 2.5 years, 2.5 years for the actual construction phase. So if we hit all those timelines, heading into 2029, 2030, the overpass should be open, should be functional. Again, the design and work plan might mean that segments of it open earlier, right? Because we might be able to do that. But just at a very, very high level, sharing those broad timelines with you and the broad budget with you.
Premier Wab Kinew yesterday speaking about the new overpass that will be built in Carberry. Construction, as you heard him say there, is expected to start in 2027. That was one of the announcements in the throne speech this week, confirming that overpass. If you want to read what else was announced, in case you missed all the details, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, let's talk about food safety. And that is because a lot of us wake up and look at the milk and think, maybe I shouldn't use this because it's gone bad. About a third of Canadians don't really know what those best before labels mean. That's according to another new study about food safety from Dalhousie University's Agri-Food Analytics Lab. The study found that nearly 40% of people throw out food that's still safe to eat. For tips on how to tell if it's still good and also why we can't get ahead of this conversation, Lawrence Goodridge is with us, professor of food safety over at the University of Guelph. Hi there.
Good morning.
It seems like we really can't repeat this message enough, right? Like just reminding people best before doesn't mean throw it out. Why do you think it doesn't stick with folks?
Because people think that best before dates have to do with food safety. And so a lot of people think that if the food is consumed before the best before date, it's safe to eat. Whereas if it's consumed after the best before date, it's not safe to eat. And so therefore, once the best before date is reached, they throw out the food. In reality, best before dates have nothing whatsoever to do with food safety. That's a completely different discussion. It has everything to do with food quality. So we're talking about food spoilage, taste, freshness and nutritional content.
So someone might be saying, but if it's after that date and it looks a little funky, then that does have to do with I'm going to get sick, I'm not taking the chance. How should people think about best before dates in terms of, is it always good a week after that date, or does it depend on the product? Help us understand how we should make decisions.
So just that question or that point you just made. Let's use milk as an example. So milk is pasteurized to kill the harmful bacteria, things like Salmonella, E. coli, that would make us sick. But the milk is not sterile. There's still bacteria growing in it. That's why if we put it in the fridge, even if we don't open it, the milk will spoil. We've all consumed, I'm sure, at some point, sour milk. It will not make us sick because the bacteria there might spoil the food, but it can't grow in our body and make us sick. So we're really talking about spoilage here. And in the context of spoilage, we can use our senses to determine if it's acceptable. So if it looks good, if it smells good, if it tastes good, regardless of whether the best before date has passed, then consume it. That's my advice to Canadians. Obviously, if it looks off, or smells off, or tastes off, even though we can't get sick from it, from bacteria growing in it, you don't really want to eat it at that point. The nutrition is broken down. It doesn't taste good or smell good, so who wouldn't want to eat that? So just throw it away.
What if I've had it in the fridge and it's past the best before date, but I've never cracked it open? Does that actually add as well, a longer time where it's consumable and a better quality?
Well, that's a great point. Best before dates only apply to foods that are unopened. Because once they've been opened, the manufacturer has lost control over that food. So what I mean by that is they can't guarantee how the consumers have stored the food, right? If the food should be refrigerated, for example, they can't control whether somebody has taken the food home and left it on the fridge or left it at room temperature. So it only refers to unopened products.
Are there common things, Lawrence, that you hear about that people do almost always throw out too early, even though they're usually still fine?
Yeah. So I was just about to say that, yogurt, for example, is a great example of this, where the product is unopened, yogurt cups in the fridge, in the back of the fridge, and then somebody finds them and they look at the best before date, it's passed, and they immediately throw it away. That product could be fine to eat. We regularly blow through the best before dates in our house. And the yogurt's fine. Other products include, we've talked about dairy products like milk, hard cheeses, like, that might have mold on it, like cheddar, for example. You can just cut off that where the mold is and eat that. Pasta is a big one that people throw away a lot. Dry foods like pasta can be stored indefinitely. They certainly will not spoil. Because there's no water for the bacteria, the spoilage bacteria to grow. So those are some of the common foods that people tend to throw away that they don't need to.
Condiments. What about the things that sit on our doors of the fridge or maybe the back of the fridge for a long time?
Yes, thank you. Condiments is another one that's fine to keep. unless we see that there's spoilage.
You mentioned cutting off the mold on the cheese, which all of us can probably relate to try to, you continue to eat the good part. What about something like that does have some wet content? So a lot of these things, I know I eat them, frankly, that these, pre-made salads, the bag salads, and then if they're past their best before, they might still smell okay in part of the bag, but then maybe part of the bag is still, it's starting to go, it's a bit wet. Can you eat the good part, leave the wet part? Is that the vegetable equivalent of cutting off the mold?
Yeah, you can do that. If it looks fine, then you can eat that. Those types of products like the bagged lettuce, the cut lettuce and so forth, and they're wet. Part of it's wet, and the other part, what that likely means is that the rest of it's going to spoil soon. Yeah. Right, because it can move throughout the. But if it looks fine, again, we're not talking about safety here. This is spoilage. It's fine.
What's the last word you want to say on this before you go this morning that you'd like people to keep in mind as we as a country try to decrease food waste?
Yeah, ignore the best before date. If the food looks or tastes fine, smells fine, go ahead and eat it. Food safety is a completely different discussion. We can't control that or know anything about that. We have to rely on the food producers to produce food according to regulations that the government, federal and provincial have, and if they do that, we can be assured that the majority of the food that we consume is safe.
All right, Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you.
Lawrence Goodridge, a professor of food safety at the University of Guelph. Next on the show, let's talk about someone that just went into a new position. Leanne Caron officially started her new role as Manitoba's first seniors advocate last week. As we get older, we often need extra support. Sometimes we get the support through benefits and resources, but for many seniors, navigating all that's a lot. And they end up relying on their adult children to figure it out for them. This week, in her series, Money in the Middle, personal finance columnist Rubina Ahmed-Haq looks at the challenge of that relationship.
When my mom fell and fractured her hip, it was a huge learning curve for me, my siblings, and my father. No guidebook tells you how things are going to go, and the healthcare options vary depending on several factors. In the end, we made decisions as a family, but what the experience showed me is this time in a senior's life is one of the most challenging to navigate, and having your adult children involved is key to making it successful. But that relationship is not always easy.
What you want to do is position yourself as a partner in your parents' wellness.
Pat Irwin is the founder and president of Elder Care Canada. She helps families manage the choices available to senior family members. This includes how to manage money, where to get the best care, and how to decide who's in charge if a person becomes unable to make their own decisions.
There's millions of ways to talk about it, but here's an example. Are you power of attorney for your parents' property and health? If not, who is? And do they know you? And do you know them? Where are their bank accounts? Who is their financial planner? Who's their family doctor? Do they know you? Do you know them? Because when the chips are down and something's got to be done, if they don't know you from a hole in the ground, it makes life very difficult.
Irwin says the most difficult conversations are often around money. Adult children usually have one idea and senior parents have another. Asking someone to spend their savings on at-home care or services like cooking, cleaning, and companionship is usually not well received.
There's a lot of anger that this has happened to me now. I'm relying on my kids, or I'm not the person I used to be. I am furious about this, and don't you remind me, and don't you rub my nose in it, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not sure they're aware of the cost.
Elizabeth McNabb is the executive director of the Ontario Society of Senior Citizens Organizations. They also provide services to help Canadians prepare for this stage in life. For example, what services are covered by the government? What free support is available? And where can you find reliable private care? In her experience, most of us are unaware of how expensive life gets as we get older.
You still have the cost of your accommodations. As you age, you're going to start purchasing services, somebody to come in and do housekeeping, somebody to do some meal preparation. You may have given up driving, so you're relying on Ubers or taxis to take you wherever you need to go. for hairdressing, for food, for socialization. You may need repairs on your home.
McNabb says adult children often step in to help seniors who are unable to support these extra costs. For the kids, this could mean cutting back on their own household budget. She recommends having the money conversation early and making changes now. So when the need arises for extra services, the basics of a safe home and access to support are already there.
Invest in what needs to happen at that point in time. And if the family dynamic is preventing you, the child, dealing with the parent, or you, the parent, dealing with your child, there's always additional resources to help you find the best path for all of you.
Both women say in most cases, families wait until there's an emergency situation to make changes and have harder conversations around money and lifestyle. They recommend that adult children and senior parents keep the dialogue open. For kids, if a family member is cognitively sharp, leave the decision-making to them and simply be a source of comfort. And under no circumstance, try to parent your parents. For CBC Radio, I'm Rubina Ahmed-Haq.
You can hear more of Rubina Ahmed-Haq in her various columns. You can find them online. And thanks to her for this morning. This issue, by the way, is confronting an increasing number of Canadians. According to the latest numbers from Stats Canada, there are now more than 8 million people in this country who are 65 years and older. And that's that boomer generation getting up there. And the generation in the middle, that Gen X generation, is a smaller generation trying to keep up with all of those needs. So it's certainly a top-of-mind conversation for a lot of families. The NDP government is proposing a $3 billion natural gas power plant. So Premier Wab Kinew confirmed this during his throne speech, and then he was here for an interview this week. He says the facility could later be converted into renewable hydrogen or biomethane. I asked Wab Kinew about why the province can't fuel the new plant right now with renewable energy.
The hydrogen industry does not exist in Manitoba. So that's the first alternative fuel. And then the second is renewable methane, which there is an early stage proponent, I should say, in the Brandon area working on renewable methane. So that one might actually come online relatively soon. Like not overnight, but like in the next, 3 to 5 years.
So that was Premier Wab Kinew on the show this week on Wednesday. The proposed plant location is in an existing Manitoba hydro generating station. So this would be in Brandon's East End, the city of Brandon. Yesterday, the mayor of Brandon, Jeff Fawcett, was on the air with CBC's Michelle McDougall. He says the new power plant is good news for his city.
Because for one thing, we have to make sure we keep our lights on. We have to make sure that our residents and industry throughout this community keep power.
So that was the mayor of Brandon speaking with CBC. So others are not so optimistic about the plan here. James Wilt is in studio. He's a researcher and policy developer for Climate Action Team Manitoba. He says it is not as easy as politicians are saying to just convert after the fact, and he's with us to talk about it. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So when you hear that this is coming and it's going to be natural gas, what was your initial reaction?
Major disappointment, and we consider it to be a betrayal of the province's climate commitments that they've made as recently as within the last month when they released their climate plan. So we think at this point in time, the province and more generally the world needs to be shifting away from fossil fuel development as quickly as possible, and that means not investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure. So we think it's hugely problematic for that point of view, but also when we consider the genuine alternatives that exist that are viable, that are reliable, and that are arguably more cost-effective than gas-fired power. And we can talk about that later, but this is things like grid-scale battery storage combined with wind and solar power. And so we think that this is really a refusal to grapple with the realities of climate change, but also to acknowledge that real alternatives exist for the province.
So the word betrayal is a pretty big one. The Premier is saying by 2035, which is their promise, they will be all green. Are you questioning that they'll be able to make that switch?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's been sort of a curious development as well. When the NDP were first elected, they committed to a net zero electricity grid by 2035. In February, when Manitoba Hydro came forward with its proposal to the Public Utilities Board for a 500 megawatt up to $1.4 billion natural gas plant, the province seemed to back away from that. But then with the recent climate plan, Manitoba's passed to net zero, it recommitted to net zero electricity grid by 2035. And so we took that as an implicit understanding that they couldn't be building new or fossil fuel-based electricity generation. However, it's clear that they think that they can do this while at the same time balancing it with their net zero commitments, which we think is completely out of line with the actual technologies that exist and that will exist, and is also implicitly dependent on carbon sequestration through possibly the direct air capture plant that's being developed near Verdun.
So let's talk about more about the alternatives that you mentioned that you feel that province could have looked at to make this happen.
Of course.
Because obviously we're all acknowledging we're going to run out of, we're going to run out of power. Like we have to do something to keep the lights on. That's a fact. So what do you think the province should have looked at?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the Premier acknowledged outright that energy efficiency and demand-side management has to be a priority. And Efficiency Manitoba is doing great work around that. There needs to be a lot more work done around that in order to actually reduce peak demand. And so that includes things like making buildings more energy efficient, but also replacing inefficient, for example, electric baseboard heating with ground source heat pumps. And so that's a far more efficient way to heat homes. And so when we hear this being justified on the basis of needing to heat homes, we would argue that you actually need to address the efficiency piece first. But in terms of actual electricity generation, we know that the province is moving forward with up to 600 megawatts of Indigenous-owned wind power, which is great, and we celebrate that. We think that there should be a lot more. But in order to maximize the benefits of wind power, we think that that needs to be accompanied with grid-scale battery storage. And so what you hear a lot about variable renewables, such as wind and solar, is, of course, they can't generate when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, which is a lot of the time. And what energy storage does is store that energy for when it is most needed, and then it can deploy it in moments of peak demand, such as the early mornings and evenings of the coldest days of the year. And so we're seeing battery storage roll out at a massive scale in a lot of parts of the world. China is obviously the leader in this for a lot of reasons, but we're also seeing this in places that you may not expect. Obviously, California would be expected, but places like Texas as well, where it's really eroding the gas-fired generation by storing renewable electricity for later.
I just want to push at this a little bit because I was at a house in, now this was many years ago, so the technology's come a long way, but I was at a house that ran on this, the exact what you're talking about, the battery storage, years ago, and it was really cool to see how they ran their whole house. It was it was in Westman, and then we went to a shed on their property, and they had these, it was almost like two giant freezers full, like that size of battery storage to store that extra power. The reason I'm raising that is because I'm thinking to myself, if we're going to do, a whole power plant to ramp up our province and to help our energy needs with and rely on battery storage, what are we talking about here? Like the size of it would be enormous, like nothing we've ever seen before.
Sure.
And then what's the cost of that? And I mean, how long could we possibly get that up and running in time to meet our needs?
No, these are fantastic questions and questions that we wish the province was actually asking and interrogating in the public. And so a recent report that we put out estimated that Manitoba's peak wintertime requirements could be met with installation of 200 megawatts of battery electric storage, in addition to the rolling out of 600 megawatts of wind power. And so that would maximize sort of the procurement process that's already underway. 200 megawatts is significant. Manitoba has no grid-scale energy storage at this point in time. But, we look next door to Ontario, and they are scaling up battery storage at an incredible rate. I think something interesting in terms of how it's being framed is while there's issues with how Ontario is doing in terms of the gas mix in the system, Premier Doug Ford is justifying it on the basis of sort of Trump-proofing Ontario by saying that this is a way to resist the impacts of tariffs is by building this up. And so the largest battery storage project in Canada right now, it's a 250 megawatt project in Ontario. It was opened in May, and it's called the Oneida Energy Storage Project. There's significant Indigenous ownership in it. So that came to about $750 million to build 250 megawatts of energy storage. That's significant. It's nothing to sneeze at. But at the same time, when we're talking about a $3 billion peaker plant, we think that these should be very much in the conversation.
What about the timelines? So the plant itself, they're saying could take, what's your sense of how long it could take? Based on what the Premier has said about the timelines for this versus the kind of, the energy that you're talking about
Of
to
course.
build this. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So in Manitoba Hydro's 2023 IRP, they were estimating that the timeline for a gas-powered plant would take about 6 years to build. This is complicated by the fact that there is a global surge in demand for gas-fired power, which is a huge issue from the climate point of view, but it's also a huge issue from procurement. And so there's been recent reports that have suggested that gas turbines are actually going to take between 3 and 7 years for wait lists to be fulfilled.
So that's your way of saying if the province is saying they're going to do this because it's faster, maybe not so much.
No, not
Based on
faster,
that
also
data.
not more cost effective. And in regards to the battery storage, this can be rolled out in 18 months to 2 years. And so this is how Ontario is sort of preparing for its future, is rolling out energy storage within the next 3 to 4 years. And so they've already installed massive capacity in this area, but it can be done far faster than gas-fired power plant and at a cheaper cost.
What's the cheaper cost?
How
much?
Well, for example,
do we have an estimate? Like if it's $3 billion to do the natural gas plant, they're saying what?
No, for sure. So again, the Oneida Energy Storage Project is 250 megawatts. That was installed for about $750 million, which actually came under budget and ahead of schedule as well. And so we think that that's a rough ballpark. There was also an even larger project, which actually just started construction within the last week, called Skyview 2 in Ontario. And that's budgeted at up to $1 billion for 400 megawatts. And so that's an enormous amount of power. So let's say just for sake of argument, between $700 million and $1 billion in order to create the energy storage that's required to meet Manitoba's peak demand. Of course, energy storage doesn't produce electricity, but it stores it, and so it really has to be developed in coordination with wind power and ideally down the road solar power as well.
So let me ask you about what they have said they're going to do, and just go back to what they've said. What would it take for the facility to convert away from a natural gas plant to something else down the future when they say we'll do that, we'll be able to do that?
Completely unprecedented technological developments and cost reductions. So there's the two different fuels that are being considered. One is hydrogen, as the Premier acknowledged. There is no hydrogen industry in Manitoba. Hydrogen has a bunch of issues when it comes to actually being able to use it in an effective way. One is because it's such a small molecule, it's very prone to leakage. It's also prone to what's called hydrogen embrittlement, and so this actually effectively decays the infrastructure very quickly. But it's also just very energy intensive to produce. And so, the thing that we're hearing a lot about is green hydrogen. And what that requires is renewable electricity to generate the hydrogen, which would then be burned in this particular plant. And so it would require a huge amount of electricity to produce a fuel that would then be burned.
Place.
Yeah.
And what about biomethane?
Yeah, biomethane is something that has been discussed a lot in the context of agricultural waste, but we can also think about landfills or wastewater treatment plants or that kind of thing. Again, it's a massive issue of scale. And so a lot of the plants that have been built around the world are producing enough biomethane for, say, 30, 40, 50 megawatts. This is a 700 megawatts or 750 megawatts power plant. And so it's just a completely different prospect in terms of scale. And there's also a lot of issues with biomethane. It is methane, so if there's any leakage at all, it will almost immediately wipe out any emissions gains. But it can also lock in a lot of really dangerous land use and just agricultural development, which we think that there's far better ways to approach.
Thank you very much for your expertise on all this and also for coming in with your perspective on why you're disappointed, to say the least, in what the Premier has announced this week.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So that's James Wilt in live with us. He's a researcher and policy developer for Climate Action Team Manitoba, reacting to the throne speech this week and the Premier confirming that they will be spending and going forward with a $3 billion natural gas power plant. And as you heard my guest say, he sees it, and many in the community that we're hoping for renewable energy in the future, they see this as a betrayal of a promise the NDP made to be green by 2035, and suggesting there's other alternatives that we should have been looking at. If you want to weigh in, 788-3205. Right now, let's turn our attention back to a story you've been hearing in the news today. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights is receiving backlash for a new exhibit slated to open next year. It's called Palestine Uprooted, a Nakba Past and Present, and it's about the lived experiences of Palestinian Canadians and the human rights impacts of forced displacement that they faced since 1947. The Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada is raising concerns about it. In a statement, Executive Director Bel Jarneski says the Jewish community was not consulted and, quote, We are tremendously concerned that the planned exhibit will lack balanced scholarly research and will ignore key issues of the historical and current geopolitical reality that is Israel, such as the multi-millennia history of successive colonization and enslavement, end quote. Now, the statement went on to say, quote, after many years of collaboration on important initiatives with the CMHR, such as the development of the Holocaust Gallery exhibit and many partnered programs commemorating the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, that we are withdrawing our collaboration for this year's January 27th program, which we had planned together with the museum, end quote. So we have some local ramifications to this, and as you can hear, Ramsey Zeid is, meantime, the president of the Canadian-Palestinian Association of Manitoba. CBC also reached out to him. He says this is a story that needs to be told by the Palestinian community.
This story is a Palestinian story that should be told by Palestinians. Just like the Holocaust story is a story told by the Jewish people. They shouldn't. No other community should be consulted about the Holocaust, and no other community should be consulted about the Nakba. It's a story that should be told by them, for them, and it's a human rights museum that represents all people. So.
Ramsey Zeid is president of the Canadian-Palestinian Association of Manitoba. He says the museum will have final say on what's in the exhibit. Isha Khan is CEO of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. She spoke with the CBC's Sierra Sanders yesterday.
It is an exhibit that shares the experiences of Palestinian Canadians who have experienced the Nakba or are intergenerational survivors. And it uses multimedia, so a number of different art forms, text and art and interactive, to share their experiences and the human rights violations that are related to forced displacement.
Okay, and so I understand the Palestinian community has been lobbying for years for an exhibit like this or something like this. When was it decided that the museum would be doing an exhibit like this?
So it's both true that Palestinian Canadians and others have been asking us, demanding that there be more content in the museum, that it shares their experiences. And we've been working on this for the last 4 years because we made the decision that absolutely we need to share these stories that are human rights stories about displacement. And so we're at the stage where we can announce the exhibit and want people to come see it.
And who, I understand the Palestinian community was a part of the conversations when it came to this exhibit. Who did you, if you can tell me, who did you consult with during the process of this exhibit?
Yeah, so in the same way that we really tell any story that you see in an exhibit here in the museum, we rely on the lived experiences of people who have experienced those atrocities or affected communities. And so we've been working and consulting with a really wide network of Palestinian Canadians and others from across Canada to help ensure that we share their story that they've entrusted and their stories that they've entrusted with us in a responsible way.
And why is this exhibit important to the CMHR?
The CMHR is a museum for human rights, and our job is to tell stories, to share stories that enable people to reflect, to understand human rights, to navigate the human rights issues of our day. This exhibit is going to be in our Rights Today gallery, so it's about contemporary issues. And there's no question that people are looking for information. They're looking to better understand what to do with the information that they have around them, around the Nakba and Palestinian experiences.
And what does the museum hope visitors will take away from it, and what kind of conversations are you hoping to start with this exhibit?
We hope that people will come and see this exhibit. We hope that by being exposed to or being able to touch and feel Palestinian experiences of forced displacement, that they'll be able to understand the human rights impacts that displacement can have on people and draw connections to other situations in history and today. Every exhibit that we tell takes stories from the past often and allows people to apply those principles and the feelings and the reflections that they have so that they can better understand human rights today and that they can actually take action and do something about it.
So The announcement of this exhibit has stirred up some concern from the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada, and they're worried the exhibit will lack balanced scholarly research and key historical and current geopolitical context. What's your response to this concern?
We understand that there are people who are concerned, who are worried about what the exhibit may do. What I can share is, for one, we've had a really long, good history working with the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada on Holocaust remembrance and other important issues related to combating anti-Semitism. This exhibit isn't a historical retrospective. This exhibit is about the experiences of Palestinian Canadians who have lived through forced displacement and their families. So it's told from their perspective, from their eyes, just like many other exhibits in the museum are. Currently, we're running a major exhibition on the LGBTQ purge, and it's told through the eyes of survivors, their words, their stories, in order to impact others and help them understand what happened at that time.
The Palestinian and Jewish community, they are kind of intertwined in their own ways. Mm-hmm. Because of this kind of, how they are kind of intertwined together, do you think that the Jewish community should have been consulted in the curation of this exhibit?
The exhibits that we develop are for all people. As a museum for human rights, we try to share stories that allow people to make connections between human rights violations occurring around the world and here in Canada. We understand that there is a question about how the exhibition was developed. This exhibition was developed with a big team of researchers, academics, curator who leads the choice making around art and design and many others. And that's how we do our work. The development of this exhibition has the same rigor as any exhibition we develop, and we do that because we feel responsible for ensuring that if a community or individuals entrust us with their stories, we're going to make sure we share them responsibly. We really steward other people's stories, and we really encourage people to come and see the exhibit to help answer some of those anxieties that they may have now.
So the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada is pulling out of a partnership with the museum to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day because of this exhibit. How will this impact the museum's ability to provide Holocaust education and programming to combat anti-Semitism?
We remain absolutely unwaveringly committed to combating anti-Semitism. We have a gallery that allows people to examine the Holocaust. We do Holocaust Remembrance Day programming every year, in addition to talking about anti-Semitism in our school tours and education programs and public tours. We will continue to do that work. We've worked with Holocaust memorial sites and organizations across the country and around the world. We hope to continue to work with the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada in the future.
What's your message to those people who might have anxieties or have those concerns about this exhibit that's upcoming?
Well, number one, I hope people will come and see the exhibit. Right now, I understand that there's concern. I also hope that people will visit the museum and experience our approach to storytelling, which is robust and rigorous and is done with care for the communities affected, and is always to ensure that people develop a better understanding of human rights. I think we need that right now.
That is the CEO of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, Isha Khan, speaking with CBC's Sierra Sanders yesterday. If you want to read more about the story and the concerns about the exhibit, and also those who are pleased to see it coming to fruition, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. And if you're just turning on the radio this morning, we are talking about the new Palestinian exhibit that's coming to CMHR. And specifically also, you heard Sierra asking a lot of questions about the Jewish community here locally and across Western Canada, with concerns that they say they were not consulted, and because of that, they're going to be pulling out of something at the museum in the new year. Well, we all have heard that ER wait times are getting longer. Maybe you're a Manitoban who has sat in an ER for many hours, or maybe you've even decided to leave. There's now new data analyzed by CBC Marketplace. It shows about 500,000 Canadians left emergency departments before being seen by a doctor last year. That data crunch shows it's a figure that has been climbing in recent years as well, attributed to lengthy ER wait times, which are also rising. ER physicians say it's a worrying trend and patients are feeling the consequences. Marketplace host Chris Glover is here to talk about this and also to give us some Manitoba data out of it. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Nice to be with you.
So a lot of people who visited ERs know the waits can be long, especially here in Manitoba. We've done a lot of reporting on this. But what have you found in terms of the impact that has on people's health?
Well, people are going to see an extreme example of the problem in the show tonight. We share a story of 16-year-old Finley Vanderwerken. Back in 2024, his parents rushed him to an ER in Ontario with abdominal pain. He was triaged at level 2, and guidelines say a doctor should see a patient like that within 15 minutes. But instead, he waited 8 hours and 22 minutes before seeing a doctor, and by then, Finley had sepsis. It was his body's response to a pneumonia infection, and he went into cardiac arrest. His organs started failing, and the 16-year-old died in hospital. Here's part of my conversation with his mother, Hazel.
I had to go up several times to the nurse's desk and ask for them to come and see Finley. He was having problems breathing and he was in so much pain, he was crying out.
8 hours and 22 minutes. What does that length of time mean?
It's a number I hate now. And it's 8 hours of 22 minutes that Finley had to suffer.
Do you think that his death was preventable?
Yes.
And so the family is now suing the hospital. In its statement of defense, Halton Healthcare denies negligence. The hospital also tells us since Finley's death, it's added more doctors during periods of high patient volume, but that is still not enough for Hazel. And so on the show tonight, Marcy, you will see how far this mother is willing to go to get accountability and action for her son's death.
Now, his long ER wait is not an isolated incident. Tell us about the national data crunch that you guys did. What'd you find?
We uncovered two main problems looking at all this data from the provinces. First, ER waits are in fact getting longer. So if you're out there thinking that it's just you, no, the data is backing this up. A common indicator to track here is something called a median length of stay. Essentially from the minute the patient shows up to the minute the patient is discharged from the ER. And median means the middle figure of a data set. So that means that for the numbers that you're about to hear, a full half of these patients waited even longer. Starting with the national stats, 4 or 5 years ago, the median length of stay in a Canadian ER was up to 4.5 hours. By 2024, that was up to 5.5 hours. And when we drill down to Winnipeg, St. Boniface Hospital had the longest median length of stay in the province. And Marcy, it was 10 hours and 30 minutes. And again, that's a median. So that means half the patients waited longer than that.
You said there were two problems you uncovered in the data specifically. So what was the second one?
The second problem is people deciding to leave an ER before seeing a doctor. And last year, about 500,000 Canadians left emergency departments before seeing a doctor. When we think about the province of Manitoba, I can tell you that last year, there were 13% of ER patients that walked out without seeing a doctor. It's the second highest percentage in Canada compared to all the other provinces, and it works out to 60,000 people. So those are 60,000 people who went to an ER for some sort of an issue and never even got assessed by a doctor before they left.
What are the consequences of that?
Well, we wanted to find out that answer, certainly. And so we did a 12-hour overnight shift outside St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto to track patients' journeys and see what they're dealing with. And by the end of that 12-hour shift, some of the patients that we'd met at the beginning were still there waiting. And we certainly met patients who did exactly what we're talking about, waited for hours, came out and said to me they were fed up and they were leaving. They were still dealing, certainly in one woman's case, with this epic pain in her back. And she had no idea what was causing it, but she had to get to work, so she had to go. And New Brunswick ER doctor Fraser Mackay is with the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians. I want you to hear why he thinks walkouts are such a major issue.
It's rare that a shift will go by where one of the patients I'll see isn't someone that was there yesterday or the day before and couldn't handle the weight and left. And now they come back and now they're that much sicker.
So in the episode tonight, you'll meet a 51-year-old woman from Moncton, New Brunswick. Susan Gordon went to an ER earlier this year with sharp stomach pain, and she was vomiting intensely. She describes the ER as chaotic, standing room only, and so after hours of waiting, she said, "Forget this, I am leaving." And in the weeks after, though, her pain intensified. She had no idea what was causing it until ultimately she collapsed and was rushed back to the ER. Turns out she had appendicitis. And that time that she had to go back, she now needed emergency surgery. Horizon Health runs the Moncton Hospital, and it said in a statement it doesn't want any patient to leave before being seen, and says long ER waits are a result of what's called boarded patients.
Okay, before you go this morning, I need you to explain that, because people that term boarded patients, what does it actually mean?
Yeah, I think it'll be new to a lot of people, but it is a term that ER patients have been assessed and treated, but they're awaiting a move to another ward of the hospital, and that other ward is full. So the patient has essentially nowhere to go and becomes a block. So in the show tonight, you'll watch us tag along for an entire shift with the chief of emergency medicine at one of the biggest hospitals in the country, Toronto's Sunnybrook Hospital. And at one point, half the ER patients there were boarded patients, many of them in the hall of the emergency department. We walked right by them on stretchers with our cameras rolling as they were getting treatment or having their vitals checked by nurses. And the day that we were at Sunnybrook, the longest boarded patient was waiting in that emergency department for 36 hours. And the thing is, as they wait there in the ER, taking up the time of the doctors and the nurses, as well as that bed space, it's a domino effect. So the people in the waiting room are stuck out there for hours as well. And we know that an increasing number of them are leaving. Every expert we interviewed said that there were a lot of factors that caused long ER wait times, including chronic understaffing and a lack of family doctors. But they all identified that this issue, boarded patients, that's the number one. So we reached out to all the provinces, Manitoba included, and they all acknowledged that the problem existed and they knew it, and they were committing to investing millions of dollars to solve at-capacity hospital units spilling over into long ER waits. But all of the provinces conceded that more work needs to be done, especially in the face of this data that we've uncovered here.
Chris, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Chris Glover is a host with CBC Marketplace. Their full investigation in critical condition is on tonight at 8 o'clock. Chris is also a reporter who worked here in Manitoba for a long time. So grateful to have all those, Manitoba stats in that report as well for some context here. If you want to read some of the stories that we've been doing on the awaits in ER, also on patients here that have left, similar to the folks that Chris had in his report today, please go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. This fall, Rosanna Hempel did a look at some of our hospitals locally as well. There is a deep look into the life of Juno-Award-winning punk rocker Bif Naked coming up in this new documentary. Bif Naked grew up in Manitoba. She broke out onto the scene in the mid-1990s with Gorilla. Then she found success with hits like Daddy's Getting Married, I Love Myself Today, and Spaceman. Now, many consider her an unapologetic trailblazer for women in Canadian music. Now the upcoming movie, the film, Bif Naked, a documentary, presses even further, as I mentioned, into her world. It is directed by Pollyanna Hardwick Brown, and it's out today.
I love myself today, not like yesterday.
Bif was just a different kind of person. Bif talked about sexuality differently. Bif was rougher around the edges. Of course she's not going to fit in.
In punk rock music, you don't give a
To succeed in this business for as long as she has, it takes a lot of grit, and that girl was full of grit.
Every single show is amazing. It's the other 22 hours in the day that are hard.
Last week, I had the opportunity via Zoom to have a feature interview with Bif Naked.
Good morning.
So how did you feel at first about doing a documentary?
Well, I have to blame my manager, as I always do, Peter. He has been my manager since, 1992-ish, since I was in Chrome Dog. And he badgered me into writing the memoir, the book that came out in 2016, which now really needs an update because a lot has happened in a decade, as our lives go. And so with the documentary, they're making a feature film based on the book Ibificus, which is nutty, which is already insane, you know. And I'm not in that. They're hiring real actors for that one. And he was bemoaning, he was in a conversation where he's bemoaning being badgered by all these, you know, very well-meaning documentary filmmakers who want to kind of make this documentary about my life, whether it's, you know, story of origin, about my adoptee story, about, you know, being born in India, about my parents being missionaries, or about me being a runaway, or really about my music career, or whatever it is. And he just kind of was, you know, brushing them off all the time. And then the producers from the feature company said, "Why aren't you working with us on this?" And it was just a labor of love. Really, Pollyanna is so thoughtful and meticulous, and she was a fan, and really just so lovingly wanted to just share my story really truthfully and I guess, I don't know, in a kind way, and just very, you know, I guess I want to say meticulously.
Yeah. How important was that to you, given that each chapter of your story, I mean, you rattled a whole bunch out there that frankly could all be subjects of documentaries on their own. You know, you talked about having an adoption story, being here and then in Winnipeg, you know, your parents missionaries. You talked about running away. Obviously, your cancer is part of your story and your journey, as is facing sexual violence. What was it like opening up for this?
Well, because I had always kind of been, you know, I've been writing these kind of really personal lyrics since I was, I don't know, in Gorilla Gorilla. Like, you know, I've never been a shy person. So, you know, these lyrics have always been out there in the world. You know, I've been able to kind of, you know, enshroud them in, you know, this poetic kind of fabric all this time. But it was very difficult, you know, kind of, you know, being very honest and tearfully recalling, you know, in interview style for the camera, some of these, you know, very factual and very intimate personal details. Some things that were not in my memoir. You know, HarperCollins is a lovely company, certainly. But we didn't talk about stalkers at all in my memoir. We did not go there. And that's, you know, HarperCollins is, you know, my book for HarperCollins is very polite.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way. It's a very polite book.
How much do stalkers factor in? Did they factor into your journey?
I have a lot of stalkers. I've always had a lot of stalkers. I've been in court a lot. The criminal justice system and me are good friends. And have always been. I have a lot of dark tales in my professional life and in my adult life, and I have a lot of dark tales in my domestic violence experience, and I have never gone there in my book, and I don't really go there too much in my documentary because there just isn't the time. You know, part of what my documentary talks about is how if you are a trauma survivor. And, you know, I am a self-respect filled prairie girl, you know. And so I always say that you have humor, you know, because we use humor as prairie girls.
Yes, we do.
We use humor as a survival technique.
As you said, you shared tears when you're doing this long interview. Do you have moments of self-reflection after that interview's done on the day and you think, whew, but this is going to reach so-and-so of a group, and that's why it's worth it? Who are you thinking of reaching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know for a fact because most of my best friends are also from Winnipeg. And I'm still friends with all the girls that I was friends with when I was 18. And we all went through all the same things. And so, you know, we all high-five at the end. So to watch that on the screen, I know for a fact that there are going to be people in the audience who are going to relate to it and who are going to leave with smiles on their faces. for sure, and bigger hearts. And I hope that everyone leaves with a smile on their face and a good feeling in their heart, because no matter what we have all been through in our lives, and everyone has a shared experience, we all have that mutuality.
This is a quote from the trailer. People might have seen this quote, but that every single show is amazing. It's the other 22 hours that are hard.
Yes, the other two.
What does that mean?
Hours in the day, because I think that people do suffer in their lives. The show is always amazing. The show is good. When you're performing on stage or whatever your passion is in life, you forget everything else in the world. You're a singer on the stage and you are hitting your note and you see your lyric has resonated with an audience member, and that's the moment you know that all your struggle that it took to create the song and the lyric of heartache has resonated with that person. All that struggle is worth it.
I wonder whether or not anything that you heard about yourself when you watched the final cut stayed with you and made you go, or surprised you, or I don't want to assign a word to it, but did you watch the final cut and go, oh, that is me, or that even, for me watching something about me, I find quite surprising or humbling, or did you have a moment when you were watching it?
Well, the whole thing for me was very humbling. I wasn't involved in the editing or anything like that. I didn't watch it all along. I watched it when it was completed. And for me, watching my birth mom be interviewed was incredibly moving. I was overcome watching her talking.
Can we stay there? Can we stay there for a moment? Just maybe why was that? Just so people that don't know much about your story. She was, I think, a teenager, right? Was she like a young woman in India when she?
She was.
Yeah.
She's only 15 years older than me, and so I felt like that was the first opportunity she's ever had to share her story ever. And to watch her talking about having to leave me behind, and for her to share that she was able to sneak down and see me one last time. I mean, that, it killed me, because I know her now. I was able to meet her. I searched for her, even though my parents were amazing. I had a great childhood. I have a great family. I had a great upbringing. But I met her when I was 21. And, I have always had a wonderful relationship with her also, which has been amazing. And now that I live out here in Ontario, because her family moved back to Canada from India. So I have a relationship with her out here, and she and I are like twins.
Wow.
I mean, it's nuts. Our mannerisms are the same. We speak the same way. The way my face wrinkles is the same as her. I mean, it's nuts. And it's so cool.
What a pleasure to talk to you ahead of the documentary that's going to stream on Super Channel on November 21st. And nice to have you with my interview with Bif Naked. We spoke at length last week in advance of the documentary about her life. Bif Naked, a documentary, is now streaming on Super Channel. The movie is to be announced for more details in the future. And we're going to see who plays her. She wouldn't share that with me, by the way. I tried to get that out of her. She's not sure who's in the running, and she's also under wraps for sharing who's being considered. So we'll have to see.